Hello, welcome to Open Data 101, an introduction to open data for Space Apps Hackathon beginners. I am Lori, one of this year's Space Apps ambassadors, and I am so pleased to be coming to you wherever you are right now, and so happy to be putting on this bootcamp session that's designed to support you in your upcoming hackathon endeavor. So one thing that is the goal of our next few minutes together is to make sure that people who are new to this feel comfortable and confident jumping in and interacting with some of this open data that you're going to be, essentially will be the raw materials that your teams are going to be working with to create your projects. So, again, thank you for joining, and let's get you oriented on open data fundamentals. So, like I said, my name is Lori, and I am one of this year's Space Ambassadors. I'm also the founder of the Civic Hacker Network, which is an international networking and support hub for those creating change in their communities through innovative uses of data and technology. I actually started my career at NASA. I'm a materials scientist and engineer by training, and my first few years were spent as a researcher and lab manager at the NASA Ames Research Center down in Moffett Field, California. And after that, I became, long story short, I'm an analytics consultant, and so I spend my days up to my elbows in data. And I also, when I'm not doing that, I am passionate about educational outreach and getting young women and men interested and involved in STEM educational opportunities outside of the classroom. So science, technology, engineering, and math. Educational outreach is definitely a passion of mine. We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome to the wonderful world of open data. We need a diversity of ideas if we're going to get the best solutions out of this. And so you don't have to be a PhD scientist to put data to work for the good of society, and we're going to be showing you that that's true. So we are going to cover the fundamentals, starting at the beginning with the definition of open data and some of the things about that topic generally. We're going to get crystal clear on the definition of open data, what it is not, and how to identify sources. Another important aspect of getting comfortable with open data is going to be having a framework that you can use to be able to exercise some judgment and compare sources to create some type of mental model to wrap your head around what you're working with. So the second main topic in this session is the 5 W's and an H. So that's our 5+1 things you ideally would want to find out before using an open data set. And then we'll wrap up with just a few tips to help your team approach the data aspect of your project as you're diving into your chosen challenge. So what is open data? Many people use the term more broadly than they should actually. Open data and publicly available data are not the same things. This open data term, this idea, is pretty loaded with a very specific meaning from both a legal and technical perspective. So what you're looking at here is the widely accepted definition of open data. So open data and content can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone for any purpose. An organization called the Open Knowledge Foundation worked with partners to create the open definition, and that's capital O, capital D, open definition. And there's a ton of detail available on the website, opendefinition.org, where I pulled this from. They have both details about the legal and the technical aspects of the open definition, that make this a really specific term and a specific idea. So legally, open means that the data has to be placed somewhere in the public domain where the terms are pretty liberal. There needs to be minimal restrictions to people who wish to use the data. This kind of openness best gets formally expressed via licensing. So we're going to discuss that in a couple of minutes, but removing the typical copyright legal restrictions that different materials have means that a person doesn't have to pay to use open data. If you wanted to use some open data to make a product that you actually charge for, you can. And if you want to take some open data and combine it with other info to make something new, you can. The technical side of being open means that the data must be published in a format that is electronic and machine readable and non-proprietary. So anyone can access and use data with software that is freely available or at least common, and the machine readable aspect of it, it would be something like a CSV file as opposed to a scanned in PDF documents. Again, drawing that contrast where, government may provide a bunch of a document dump, say for Freedom of Information Act requests, but that doesn't count as open data because those PDFs are not considered to be, a machine readable format. So really the technical side of it is about, a lot about access. So, the data would be on a public server, there wouldn't be a password or firewall restrictions. So what are some examples of open data? It turns out that we all interact with open data outside of hackathons, believe it or not. So let's see if I can get my slides to change. Here's some of the more common examples that you may or may not be aware of, open data kind of coming into your daily life. I don't know about you, but I've been known to use a map app for directions and navigation. And back when I used to go places, the before times, I would check the weather forecast, which is open weather data that someone's putting to use in your weather app. In the US, we're currently updating a pretty important data set, which is our census. The demographic data that gets opened up from that survey is certainly something I use often in my work. And we can't forget about the open data that is connected to the most pressing issue of our time right now, and the reason why we're all here together for this challenge. Johns Hopkins University's now famous COVID-19 dashboard is actually a really interesting demonstration of that difference between data that is open, meeting the true definition, and versus what is not. What is publicly available but not technically open. Things have likely changed for some governments by now, but in order for this dashboard to have all of the different data, for different locations to incorporate, there's had to be a lot of manual work. There had to be web scraping, and they were getting data however they could, and of course confirming it, and then combining it all into this publicly available dashboard. So while all the information that they grabbed was publicly available, not all of it was technically open. And now this new product that they've created is actually open data. They all of the data that they collect and display is freely available through a GitHub repository, along with some of the other feature layers of the dashboard. So it's a really actually very similar to what you're going to be doing in terms of getting, taking open data and making it into something new that's also open. So I think it's important to say a bit more about licenses at this point, because in the strict legal sense, if there's no license for specified for a work or for data, then really no one should be using it and sharing it or transforming it or anything like that. So responsible data publishers often include a license that clearly tells you what you can use the data for. Now, you can use open data for any purpose, data that's truly open. You'll see here there's different, kind of requests for things like attributing the source or making what you produce also open. And you're probably familiar with the Creative Commons license. A lot of these are having that, the CC ones that you see here. They Creative Commons licenses you probably have encountered if you've ever used like stock photos or going on photo sharing sites like Flickr. There's another license that is more recent and designed specifically for databases, and that is from the Open Data Commons. So as open data has become more of a prominent idea, we are getting more movement in making it easy for organizations to expressly tell people what they can and can't do with that data and how open it is. So this is WorldPop. They have some fantastic work on mapping populations around the world, and they have opened up the data behind their maps. So we're going to look at some data on births. They have it by individual countries, and you can see here kind of our options. We're going to choose one of these to look at, Egypt. So here is the metadata, right? Metadata is just data about data, so it gives us some information about the formats and what the recommended citation is. But here is the license, international license. This is the data owner telling you specifically and clearly what you can and can't do with the data. And you will, of course, not always find this information so easily. WorldPop, has this well-organized, rich metadata for us, but sometimes the info is going to just be on the about page of a portal site, or there'll be an about this data link where you might find the licensing information. If there's a contact for the data, you can always try contacting them just to find out if your intended use of their data is permitted. So speaking of metadata, this is where we take a cue from our journalist friends and talk about the 5 W's and 1 H. So you have an idea to create something. You're wanting to create, like in this case, an app, or maybe in your work you're wanting to create an infographic, etc. So you find the data that you need to be able to produce what you want to produce, but how do you know if you can use it or if you should use it? Is the quality something that you feel comfortable with using as the core of your product? Is the data in a format that you can use without too much extra processing? Is the scope of it appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish? You will be more comfortable and confident in using open data if you know how to answer these kind of questions about any data that you encounter. And getting you comfortable and confident is what we're about here. So starting off, who made the data open? You of course want to know who's behind a given data set and make your own determination as to whether or not that source is going to be credible. As our example with Johns Hopkins, shows, the data owner and the person or people who make the data open may not always be the same people. So you do want to be aware of kind of this chain of custody of what you're working with. And this is why attributing sources actually in derivative works is pretty important. So you want to know that the entity making the data open had the right to do so if the information that they were, was not open to begin with. So what is the source of the data? So we can consider, for example, whether or not some data is machine generated, generated by sensors versus something that's collected by citizen scientists, or crowdsourced. Some data sets have more robust QA, quality assurance, and controls in place than others. And so knowing if you're looking at sensor data or satellite data will help you find clues about some of the features and bugs, because all data sets have their quirks, you know, that you're going to encounter. So, you know, something like missing values in a crowdsourced data, it might be an issue, depending on the quality assurance in place. So you also, by knowing how the data was generated, you can find examples of how scientists or how other people deal with the particular, you know, the idiosyncrasies of that type of data. What data formats are available to you? We talked about open data being technically open, being machine readable. So depending on what you plan to do with the data and the volume of the data, you may not need to or want to access it programmatically, such as via an API, which is Application Programming Interface, a static comma-separated text file, CSV, or an Excel file might be just fine for you. So what is the source of the data? What data formats are available? And now we can talk about when. This third W reminds us to pay attention to the temporal features of a data set we're looking at. In my experience, time always comes into play in several ways when you're dealing with data. So, you know, you of course want to know when the data was published. A lot of times you're looking, you know, you care about recency, but maybe not. Also, when was the data last updated? What time periods are available? Are you looking at weekly data? Is this daily data? Is it something that a machine generated by the hour or by seconds? So these are kind of a set of features around time that you would want to look for. So where was the data collected? Where data is collected geographically also provides some important context as you're getting to know a data set that you may or may not want to use. So a log of outdoor temperatures, for example. So a log of outdoor temperatures over time doesn't mean much without a location, right? And the same numbers can mean different things depending on the location. So it's possible, as you will see overwhelmingly with if your space app is going to use Earth science data, that the location is actually important data in and of itself. We talked about GPS earlier, and thanks to the breakthrough in open data that, you know, GPS represents, so much of the data that we can access has location information or coordinates associated with it. So this is another dimension of an open data set that you may want to, you know, be aware of as we are familiarizing ourselves with a given data set. So fifth W is why. This is less technical, but worth knowing, especially in the case of research data. The focus of a study that produces data tells you something about the question that the researcher or institution was trying to answer. And that can give you clues about whether or not it's relevant to your project. It can factor into, you know, trust. And sometimes a data portal will include a statement about why they have made their data open that can give you clues about, you know, a direction about what they're intending to have done with the data. And, you know, the why may also show up in just, you know, the mission statement of the organization releasing the data. So here's our +1. The how question. This ties us back to the licensing issue that we already talked about. If provided, the license will give you some clear indication of how you can use the info. Access is an important aspect of data being technically open, and it's one of the things you'll want to quickly find out. You know, you want to find out whether or not you can access the information that's in a way that's helpful to you. So not all open data has a way to access it dynamically or programmatically. You now know what open data is for sure. You have a framework to help you get acquainted with any data set that you're interested in. You've got your 5 W's and an H, and now it's time to dive in with your team. Go for it, my friends. Remember, you cannot break anything, and you're not alone. You use experts, past and present. The subject matter experts are going to be available in near real time for the Space Apps Challenge if you have questions. And there's also an entire body of scientific literature from the space agencies that have issued this challenge that you can use and lean on. And then, there's open access to previous Space Apps projects on GitHub. So you don't need to start from scratch. Each challenge is going to have some links to relevant resources provided, and it's going to include some open data sources that you are now prepared to engage with. So we're going to quickly take a look together at data.nasa.gov. This is NASA's clearinghouse site for open data provided to the public. So you can get to literally tens of thousands of data sets through here. And we're going to have a look together just so you're that much more comfortable. All right, so here we have one of the most viewed data sets on the portal, Mars, these meteorite landings data. And depending on the challenge you're working on, one of the resource links might take you to a page like this one. So you can see a lot of the 5W info that we talked about is already nicely presented right away. And we get some detail about what fields there are and what the data types and field names are for the APIs. Here you can actually see the data itself in kind of a preview. And if we go ahead and want to view the data, it's not too many rows. What I want to point out here is, some of the options in this type of portal for actually accessing the data. So on this export button here, you can see some of your different options. API, OData, this is a type of connector, if you were using certain visualization software, and Excel even has built-in connectors for that. This is a specific type of API. There's a way you can get the data. Here again, they give us our nice field name summary, and if I just want a static file, they have the comma separated options. Another common one is JSON. And so this type of data portal is something that for NASA data you're gonna see this quite a bit. And so, before you lose precious time and get overwhelmed wading through all of the available open data, remember that there are some more kind of curated access points that you can rely on to get a sense of what relevant data sets you should look into for your project. Depending on the focus of your project, you can go directly to a data portal dealing with that subject area, like the a site like NOAA, for example. In the project or domain-specific sites, examples I've listed here, WorldPop was something we already looked at. They have their specialty, and then also, we're doing a COVID-related challenge, and there are, of course, lots of local and regional COVID-19 data portals. Another way to cut to the chase, so to speak, would be to learn from and reuse existing work. So the NASA Datanauts have a GitHub that you could go to and see templates for exactly how they're working with NASA data. You absolutely want to look into relevant published scientific literature, because in the citations you can see what data someone else has used to work on a problem in this given subject area. And of course, checking out the previous Space Apps projects, of which there are many, and many are on GitHub. So the main takeaway here is that you don't need to start from scratch. To wrap up, I just want to thank you for participating in this important challenge. There we go. So what a time we're living in, right? And it's wonderful that you're participating. So whether you are just curious and here to learn and try to learn some new skills or try something new, or if you're a hardcore hackathon competitor that's here to crush it, I wish you the very best. Please do feel free to reach out for help. We're here for you, and we want you to learn and be successful. And we'll see you at the hackathon.